What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. And today we will be covering more unsettling true stories. These are a lot of fun to make, so I'll keep making them as long as you keep watching them. So let me know down below if you'd like to see more. And also, if you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel. It's the channel's goal to be at 250,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So consider subscribing. Alright, now let's get into the first story. Were people living in my attic? I am on a throwaway account. This is for my safety. You'll find out why soon. To start this story off, I'd like to say I'm not a believer of the paranormal, which could be applied to some of the details if you are an avid believer. Some disclaimers are, my area is a pretty dangerous area. A lot of gangs and stuff live here, and a lot of crime happens. My garden is surrounded by fences. The back one leads to the main road. I suffer with audible and visual hallucinations. I've been living with my dad for around 3 years now. I have pretty intense mental health issues, so I don't know if I'm being delusional and/or detaching from reality. My house is relatively outdated. We have heating that is controlled by a big flame in the center of the house that transport heat through the vents. And the majority of the house is made from wood. The floors, the stairs, which are extremely loud and creak a lot when you walk up and down them. We have 3 rooms upstairs, all connected by one hallway. And in the middle of that hallway, the entrance to the attic is on the ceiling. My father's door is directly across from mine, and the bathroom door is opposite the stairs banister, or railing, or whatever you want to call it. In between both of our rooms, remember that. It started off as me hearing noises, rustling around in the attic, but I figured that a bird had got stuck up there. That has happened before, and the majority of the noises were in the morning, after I wake up, and before I go to sleep. The normal times are around 7 to 9 a.m. and 10 to 11 p.m. I asked my father, and he had thought the same, so I shrugged it off. Around 2 to 3 months ago, the noises are becoming more consistent and common. But again, I shrugged it off and drowned it out with music or YouTube videos whilst on my computer. I wouldn't let my paranoia get to me until one night. I had woken up around 3 a.m. and I could have sworn that I heard footsteps above me. I heard them moving across the attic floor. I could hear where the noises were coming from and where it was located in the attic. I ran into my father's room to wake him up. I'm not sure if we had startled something up there, but the noises stopped, and my father didn't believe me, and he said I was just hearing things. I suffer with audible hallucinations, sometimes visual, so I again shrugged it off, as a little reassurance is all that I needed. I hadn't heard anything for a couple weeks after that, and I'm not sure why. The morning and nightly noises were still persistent, however. We went out one day, me, my father, and my dogs. I had left my PC on. My door was slightly open and the bathroom door was closed. I leave my door open out of habit so my dogs can roam around the house when we are home. However, they do their bathroom in the bathroom, so we close the door while they are home, because we don't want them doing that. We were out for around 3 to 4 hours. We went on a nice walk. When we got back, I headed back upstairs into my room. And the events that happened are in order. I saw that my door was closed. Must have been a draft. Just before I got into my room, my father shouted up the stairs to me. And he had complained that I had left milk and a packet of meat out of the fridge. I told him that I didn't. It wasn't me. My father is a very logical man. He thinks there's always a logical explanation to everything. So he was confused, but he said he must have done it himself because I was sure that I didn't take anything out of the fridge. Before going into my room after the conversation with my father, I saw that the bathroom light was on and the door was wide open. I went to search around the bathroom, but I couldn't find anything that could be necessarily out of suspicion. As I walked out of the bathroom, remembering that the banister is facing you when you leave the bathroom, I had seen some paint chipped away from the banister, something I have never noticed before. All of this could be explained as coincidence, or maybe I did close my door, open the bathroom door, leave the light on, never noticed paint chipped away on the wooden banisters. Maybe my dad did get some stuff out of the fridge and forgot to put it away. And that's how I thought at the moment. I did not want to believe that someone else was living in our house. But when I entered my room and sat down on my computer, I noticed that it was no longer on the YouTube video and on some European food website which was in English. However, no idea. Other than that, my computer had no other evidence of being tampered with on. Just that food website could have been a pop-up. Things had escalated from there. Me and my father kept hearing weird noises in the night and even during the days, bangs and thuds, etc. My father goes to work 5 days a week. He leaves at 5 a.m. and gets home around 7 p.m. I don't work, and I am home to hear everything. A lot of the times when I'm home, I hear these noises, and my dogs do too, so I know I'm not hallucinating. My dog started sniffing and peeing around the area underneath the attic latch. I have no idea why. My dogs are 3 to 4 years old at this point, both of them, and they've never really peed in a place they haven't before, if that makes sense. One Christmas, my dad had gone on holiday, leaving me on my own in the house for a few weeks. Probably the scariest time of my life. I'm an adult. I should be able to defend myself, right? Well, everything was fine for the first few days. It was lovely to have time alone. I cooked a lot, spent a lot of time with my dogs, even made them some nice food too. I had somewhat stockpiled food into my fridge and freezer to last me for a few weeks, meaning I didn't really have to cook much, just to microwave and or defrost the day before. After I had cooked everything, one day had gone by. I noticed small things going missing from the refrigerator every day after waking up. I had these snack/bite-sized cheese wheels that I hadn't opened, but were open. Some of the food I made was going missing, and I was running out of milk a lot faster than I could have imagined. This persisted for around 3 days before I called a friend to come and stay downstairs. I explained the situation to him, and he was more than happy to stay on the couch for a few days to somewhat protect me. He's not scared of much, and he's very strong, so he could probably fight for himself if he needed to. The very first night he was there, we did a test. We acted as if we were leaving the house and gently slamming the front door to potentially prompt whatever was in my attic to come down and have free reign on the house while we were out. We practically tiptoed back into the center of the living room and sat in silence for about 10 minutes, whispering at most. We heard the noises, extremely close to the latch of the attic, almost like a scratching noise, to get their nails under the hatch to open it or something. I have no idea. As my friend heard it, he stamped his foot on the ground to intimidate, assuming that there was somebody up there. Not to mention my dog started growling at this point too. I knew I wasn't just hearing things, and I had another person for proof. At this point, I was extremely terrified, and my friend, which was surprising, was also scared too. He said that he wouldn't sleep at night if he heard the noises, and said he'd stay up all night with me if need be. I quickly responded to him saying something along the lines of, "Fuck no, bro. We're leaving. I'm gonna pack my bags, bring the dogs, and we're going to your house." He agreed, and we left for the night. And I came back the following afternoon with him to see if anything in the house had changed. There were dishes in the sink that had been used and not washed, food missing from the fridge, and I had switched off all the electrics from the mains before I had left, such as PC, chargers, lamps, etc. I was sure someone was living in my house somewhere. My PC was on, but luckily I had a passcode on it, so they couldn't get in. When I recognized that all of this had happened, I called the police. They came and searched all over my house. They didn't go into the attic. They just opened the latch and spoke up into the attic. No reply. They had no explanation for the food going missing and the computer being on, but they couldn't help apparently. I got some clean clothes, repacked, and I left. This time, my friend dropped me off at my mother's, and I stayed there for a few days, with my dogs. Upon returning, one of my neighbors had caught me just as I was entering the house. They knew my father was away. They had said, "We saw 2 people climbing over your garden fence while you were gone," meaning they had jumped over onto the main road and made a run for it. It wasn't unusual for weird stuff to happen in my area, but that was too weird. Most of the time, they hop from garden to garden if they're being chased by police. Anyway, I went into the house. As I left it, how it was when I left. Nothing had changed, no food had gone missing, and the same dirty dishes were in the sink. And that's the very last I heard any of the noises. It's been almost 1 year since I've heard anything, or anything strange had happened. Everything is normal. But knowing that people could have been living in my attic mere meters away from me is terrifying. Please let me know what you think, because to this day, I'm still terrified and confused, and I lack the feeling of being safe. What would you have done? Edit. This account is no longer active. Thank you all for your help. I've written down all your suggestions. I made this account for nothing else other than to ask for advice. As for criticism, I appreciate the comments, but I do not care for it. I'm only here for advice on this specific story. I know what happened, and whether or not you believe it is your choice. Thanks again. Goodbye. Scary sleepover story. I've always been good friends with my one cousin, Cole, who's the same age as I am. The two of us were not quite inseparable, but we always did get along very well together, and were often found together, both in school, as we'd always wound up in the same class together throughout elementary school, and outside of it. When we were 12 and in the 6th grade, I was hanging out with Cole on a Friday afternoon around the later part of May, and we were psyched at the start of the weekend. We'd wound up at his house since he didn't live too far away from me, and at one point, my mom called to say that our grandpa was in the hospital. While the issue with our grandpa wasn't expected to be life-threatening, he was being kept at the hospital overnight for observation, and both my parents and Cole's were planning on staying with him and grandma at the hospital, since my mom and her sister were the two of their siblings who lived close by. I was told that I was given the okay to stay at Cole's house for the night, with Cole's 15-year-old brother Hunter being in charge while our parents were out. This was fine by us. I got along well enough with Hunter, and he was never that bossy older brother or cousin that some of my other friends said they had to put up with. We ordered out for pizza, and enjoying goofing off as boys that age tend to do. At around 9 or so, there was a knock at the front of the door, and Cole went to answer it. I was a bit curious as to who it could be at this time of night, and so I watched from a ways back. At the door were two older guys. They said that they were from the city and that they were investigating reports about the water pressure supposedly being bad in the neighborhood. They asked Cole if his parents were home, and when Cole said they were unavailable at the moment, which we were told to say of strangers if our parents weren't home, the guys started asking a bunch of questions about how the water pressure was in the house and if they could come inside to check. Hunter came over at that point and politely told the guys that the water pressure was fine and perhaps they should move on to check on other homes in our neighborhood. The guys seemed reluctant to leave, but turned and walked away after Hunter started closing the door. After the door was shut, we looked at each other and shrugged, but didn't think too much of it after that and went back to goofing off. Eventually, we decided to go to bed. Cole and Hunter shared a bedroom, and we all agreed that I'd sleep in there with them, rather than me hitting the sack on the couch or something like that, so that we could talk while we fell asleep. And Hunter grabbed a sleeping bag out of their camping supplies for me. When we got into their bedroom, they stripped down to their briefs, and I remembered Cole had mentioned to me once a while back that they had started sleeping in just their underwear. Since I hadn't originally planned on staying that night, I hadn't brought anything with me from home so far as overnight stuff, but since I wasn't in the mood to sleep in my clothes, I stripped down to my briefs as well. Though I felt a bit embarrassed, even though we were all guys there, I knew they wouldn't say anything or be judgmental. They climbed into their beds and I quickly crawled into my sleeping bag. And after talking for a while about random stuff, we eventually fell asleep. Early the next morning, I got up because I had to pee, and so I quickly got out of my sleeping bag and went and did my business in the bathroom. On the way back to the bedroom, I heard something in the family room, which was on the opposite end of the house from the bedrooms, in particular bathroom I was using. I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time, thinking it must be either Cole or Hunter, until I got back into the bedroom and realized that both of them were still in there. Trying not to panic, I woke them and told them that I thought someone was in the house. They quietly followed me. And the moment we walked into the family room, we saw the two guys from the night before were there, and it was rather clear they were robbing the place. One of them started moving towards us as he pulled out a wicked-looking knife. The three of us promptly raced to the front door, somehow managed to get in and unlocked it and opened, and we fled outside. As luck would have it, a cop was driving by at that particular moment. We quickly flagged him down and told him about the two guys in the house. The cop called for backup, and within a couple of minutes, several other cops were there, and they proceeded to enter the house. And after some searching, they caught the two guys. The cops figured out that the two guys must have entered from a window in the laundry room that had a broken latch, and had probably targeted that house because, while it wasn't empty, they'd probably realized that there were no adults there and figured that if we discovered them, we would be more easily dealt with than adults. To add insult to injury, while we were waiting outside while the cops searched the house, both to get the two guys and make sure that there were no one else with them, some of the neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. And this included some kids who went to the same school as Cole and me, including a few who were in the 6th grade class with us. It was during that time that the three of us realized that we would never have the chance to get dressed. So, just like in stereotypical Nightmare, we had to stand outside in full view of everyone in just our briefs for what seemed like forever before being allowed back inside. When we went back to school on Monday, Cole and I had to put up with more than just a bit of snickering, stares, and ribbing for the next few weeks until school ended for the summer. One of my mom's neighbors is a psychopath. This happened in October of 2019. I just came across the photos on my phone, but I don't know if I should upload them. So it was a weekend and I figured it would be a good idea to go out of town for a day and introduce my girlfriend to my mom for the first time. She lives out on the plains on 40 acres. The house and land are a quarter mile off the road into the field with our long driveway dividing the land of two neighbors. We arrived around noon, and my brother and his wife also happened to be out there visiting that day, so I introduced the girlfriend to everyone and all the dogs. I noticed that the loudest and most obnoxious dog, the beagle, didn't come greet us, and my mom explained that the previous night she went to grab something from the truck, and on her way in, the dog had darted out the door and ran off into the field, and he still hasn't come back. This isn't all that uncommon for a dog to run off in the night and come back a couple days later. Later that day, my mom recalls that her and my nieces were woke up around 1 a.m. to all the dogs howling and barking nonstop, just going nuts. Eventually, they stop, and everyone goes back to sleep. We continue to have a nice quiet day out in the middle of nowhere for a few more hours when we notice that this hawk has been flying around the same spot all day in the field, so my brother and his wife go to check it out while I mess around doing something else. A few minutes later, my brother comes back and tells me he found the missing beagle, but something is wrong. I should go check it out before telling my mom. I follow my brother into the field expecting to find a dead dog. As we're walking, I see a spot of blood and think that it was probably coyotes. He shows me a trail of blood that leads to a larger puddle and another trail. The dog seems to have been drug around some. That trail led to an area in the field where the dog lay. As soon as I saw the dog, something looked wrong about the scene. All the plants around him were trampled, and something looked different about him. I took a few more steps and realized that he is missing skin. This wasn't just a few bits missing from a fight or birds picking at him, though. The only fur or skin left on him was his head, tail, and paws. With very distinguished straight lines, he had been skinned. Some sick person had killed, skinned, and taken the pelt of our dog in the middle of the night, only a couple 100 feet from the front door. Of course, we called the cops. They took 2 hours to arrive and took pictures. We looked around the area and noticed tire tracks, but we couldn't tell how old they were. We also found a pile of horse shit that looked pretty fresh close by. Did whoever did this ride a horse out there? To this day, the cops have never followed up with anything, and nothing else has happened yet. Nature cams were installed, and fences have been mended, so dogs can't get out, but we still have no idea who did it. I came across the pictures on my phone today, and can't seem to bring myself to delete them. Skinwalker story. I've posted this one a couple times before, but seems fairly relevant. A personal experience that I had a while back. Still kind of messes with my head when I reread it. I'll be the first to say that all this stuff could have taken place in my head. The mind is a freaky thing and can play some pretty chirpy tricks on you. Sorry for the length. Whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me that in life, you should not be scared of ghosts. Fear the living because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed S-word and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So, for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer, and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, and headed up in my dad's car that he had willed to me to the cabin. Now, this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the year when we were not using it. I had keys to the cabin and also had the code for the alarms, so I did not feel the need to stop at the rental management company and advise them of my stay. This has nothing to do with the coming story, but felt the need to mention it anyway. The first 2 days at the cabin were normal. Nothing out of the unusual happened. Spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding in the evenings playing PlayStation or just listening to music, drinking and smoking out on the balcony. Had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut inside from the occasional out to hit the slopes, with my dog as company and DVDs/PlayStation as entertainment. I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. Bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom along with small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time there was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. Open doors to dark rooms always creeped me out. Anyhow, the 3rd day came around and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog. His name was Midnight, by the way, and he had also since passed, playing games and watching DVDs. That day, it was pretty heavy snowfall, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in my car and decided to stay in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us were mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Tall. This is important later on. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days I knew that no one was currently staying there. Gave enough background and I'm going to jump to the weirdness. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright, whatever. The prints led away from my cabin and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees. Disregarded the footprints and went back inside. Nighttime came around and decided to head to bed. My dog, Midnight, was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to the standstill listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in bed and stayed silent. I was kind of freaked out and could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only, he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull on his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of our house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go where he wanted to, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright. Maybe there are forest animals out there that he wants to chase down, but fuck this. Did not want to chance anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from the tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing. The steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride. So it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the time considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself, so I grabbed my coat and shoes, along with my cigarettes and flashlight, and went out onto the balcony. Fuck it, right? As soon as I was outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Must have been all in my head? What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my fear or paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. By the way, I am shaking right now, and my heart is beating hard as I'm typing this next bit. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between two branches. It was squatted on one branch and its arms were extended above its head, holding onto the branch above it. Fuck me, what the fuck is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to the bed. But later on in the night, I heard light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open the door, but at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and not to do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was, passed out eventually, and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was non-eventful and nothing out of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could have been all in my head. A lot of stuff was going on at the time, so I was pretty fucked up from all the drama. Edit. Getting more replies on this one again. So, to answer some questions. 1. Yes, was scared as shit when it happened, and the stuff I did may seem kind of ballsy, but the reality was that I was not really thinking everything through when I went out onto the patio to investigate. More impulse, if anything else. 2. I did stay the whole week after that night. The reason being because I really had nowhere else to go. My mother had sold her house and was staying with family while the sale of her new house was going through. Her family was one I did not get along with. I could not go to my dad's side of the family because they partially blamed me for his death. And at the time, I did not feel like being consoled by friends. 3. My dog Midnight never acted weird like that before. But again, he could have been feeding off my anxiousness. 4. The cabin was sold soon after, and I never spoke with the buyers. It was all done through a realtor. I have not been back to the area, or Oregon, since it happened. 5. Yes, I have had some other weird experiences since that time, but nothing as sketchy or frightening as that night. 6. And yes, the incident still scares me. I actually sleep with night lights around the house and have flashlights placed in each room along with other items in case something happens or the lights go out. 7. Oh, and thank you about the condolences about my father. It happened a while back. Still feels fresh in my mind though. Mommy, I've been thinking about the devil a lot. Hi, never posted before, and not quite sure if this is the right place, but here we go anyways. This is one of the scariest things to happen to me as a kid, and it has always stuck out to me. It was about 10 years ago, and I was 9 years old. I had just moved back to California with my family. We were to be living with my grandmother in a cramped 2-bed, 2-bath, and I was excited. My grandma was an older, pretty religious Filipino woman, a converted Hindu and faithful Catholic. I'm not sure if that's a contradiction because I don't know much about either religion, but her house had lots of shrines, candles, paintings of Jesus and Hindu gods, and this overall weird energy I could palpably feel as a kid. It's important to note that I now consider myself a very open person, someone who may unknowingly attract these sorts of occurrences. This may not be important to the story, or maybe so, I'm not entirely sure. But as a kid, I would hear music and voices whispering to me, as well as smell strange things when triggered by certain words. At the time of this event, this was something I was used to and knew about myself. Because of this, I had some interest into Wicca and the occult. Not as much as I would later have because I was still a child, but enough to often sit on the floor of my aunt's dimly lit and cramped room and look at her books on witchcraft. I don't know when and why, but around that time, I began to have super strange, frequent, and all-encompassing thoughts of the devil and demons. Like it would always be running through my mind, and I would comfort myself by remembering to recite some of the Hail Mary my mother had taught me. My aunt's room had a really creepy, suffocating feel to it, but I'd always spend time alone up there even though I felt as if I were something watching me. I could place the energy, gaze, I guess, coming from in front of her closet. My aunt is mentally ill and at the time was not on meds, so her room was filled with stuff, but especially the closet. It was always open, about a couple feet or so, with lots of her things kind of stuffed in and falling out. And it was always pitch black on that side of the room, especially in the closet from what I could see. I slept up there with her and was so jumpy and afraid all the time that I couldn't even shower by myself. One night, my aunt goes out with my mother, my little brother, and I go to sleep on her bed. I remember I was so afraid, and I couldn't stop staring at this creepy, green fairy thing that my aunt had hung from a string near her bed. It always seemed to sway, and I felt that when I looked in its eyes, it was sentient or something. I was in between my mom and brother, but sleeping the opposite way from them at their feet, staring at this space near the closet. I went to sleep, and in my dream, woke up. I sat straight up and felt such dread and fear I'll never forget. In the dream, I tapped my mom awake, and she looked at me in surprise. She said, "Ayana, you're bleeding." I then felt my nose and realized blood was dripping from it. Then my eyes, my ears, and my mouth. I got super freaked out and said, "Mommy, I've been thinking about the devil a lot." And something along the lines of how I couldn't stop and was really scared. But by the time I was done talking, she'd actually laid back and gone back to sleep. Then, in a moment of fucking horror, something was on top of me. It was dark and I couldn't see, but I remember thinking it was a little white man. It was sitting on my chest with its knees on my collarbones, growling, hissing, making terrifying noises while it was literally, and I mean literally, choked the absolute hell out of me. I was trying to flail my arms around, but I couldn't move. It lasted so long I remember thinking, oh my god, when will this end? And then, as suddenly as that, I awoke for real. I was laying on my back, breathing heavily, and feeling sore, in the exact same spot as the dream. Briefly, I thought, oh no, is this real? Will it happen again? So I lay in silence until I could muster the courage to turn and look at the closet. I felt absolutely horrified. The space was radiating the most intense, deep hate and evil I will never forget. It has stuck with me for so long. I could just feel something staring at me so intensely. And also the sense that it knew that I knew it was there, that we were looking at each other in that moment. I rubbed my mom's hip for comfort and laid back down, immediately starting on a Hail Mary. I did it again and again until I could fall back asleep. For some reason, I also felt, although I was asleep, that whatever it was left. I could sense it walking out of the room. When I woke up, I went to stand near the closet and the space felt kind of empty. Anyways, grew up and forgot about this story. Used to tell it to my friends for a scary laugh, but I've just finished my first year of college and moved back here for the summer, so it's been on my mind. This wasn't even the most frightening thing to happen in this house, so we'll see if any other future things happen. Hopefully not. LMFAO. The Man Outside. About 4 months ago, I began to hear strange things from friends around my neighborhood. For context, I am 17 and live in a nice and expensive neighborhood with my mother and sister. Around 5 every day, I would take my dog out to a nearby park where there would be around 5 to 10 people there with their dogs every day at the same time. I would have casual conversation with the occasional political argument, but for the most part, it was all very casual and relaxed. One day, I arrived at the park with my dog, who was eager to play. I walked in and said hello. I knew almost everyone there and had memorized all the names of their dogs. I walk into a conversation about strange occurrences that have been happening around the neighborhood. I hear firsthand accounts of strange and terrifying things that have been happening in people's backyards. I hear about someone who swears they say someone run through their backyard in the middle of the night. I hear someone say they walked out to their backyard to find a dead squirrel and human shit. I also hear about one guy who says he walked out with his dog into his backyard at night only for his dog to start frantically barking and cowering for no apparent reason. All these people live around 30 seconds away from me, so naturally I was interested and quite worried. I get home that day and talk to my mother about all this, and she tells me how she has been seeing many sketchy people around lately. At the time, I had been given lots of homework from school, so I ignored it, hoping nothing would happen to us. A few weeks later, I am on Christmas break and have 2 weeks off school. I'm sleeping at 4 a.m. every day and playing a lot of video games. One night, I hear my phone vibrating. I got to check it and see that it is my sister. I answer to hear her frantically telling me to come downstairs. I get up from my desk and run downstairs to see if everything is okay. As soon as I get down, I see both my cats and my dog staring out into my backyard and my sister standing back in fear. I run up to her and ask if everything is okay, knowing something is clearly wrong. She tells me in a vivid detail how she was doing work on her laptop when she sees our dog get up and bark at the window. She says that when she looked out, she saw a tall figure staring directly into the house. I immediately ran and grabbed a baseball bat and ran back to the window. For the next 30 minutes, my sister and I stared out into the pitch black in complete silence. As I clenched the bat, I thought about what could have happened. Could have been nothing? Could have just been an animal that my sister thought was a person? Because I never saw anything, I could not tell you. All I know is that the look on my sister's and my pet's faces meant something was out there. Unknown visitor at night watches me outside my open window. I've been a lurker here for quite a while, and I have decided to share one of my stories. I'm originally from a state where it's predominantly hot year-round, and I am not a big fan of warm weather. So when winter comes around, I like to have my windows open and spend as much time outside. Temperature average around the 50s, but that's beside the point. It was one of those chilly winter nights. I was about 10 years old, and the only people home were my 2 nannies and me. They were at the other side of the house watching TV while I was in my room. It was getting late and was likely around 10 p.m., so I decided to take a shower and hop in bed. Everything's fine. I hop out of the shower and get ready for bed. At this point, I should quickly go over the layout of my room. It's rectangular and has 2 windows facing the front door entrance to my house. From my windows, you can see a walkway to the front door, and the path is sort of gated in brick. Basically, you'd have to enter the driveway, turn left, and walk down a path that leads to my front door. My bed faces one of those windows, and I can see all the way down the path. Both windows have a mesh screen. This is where things get scary. Like I mentioned earlier, I had the window facing my bed open to let the cold air in. My room was well lit, so it's hard to see anything through the window. However, as soon as I turned off the light, I see the figure of a man with his face pressed upon the screen. In that moment, I feel his piercing gaze. He's motionless and smiling. He had facial hair that looked as if his whole face was covered in fur, and the hair on his head was the same length. I briefly thought I was imagining this and was seeing something that wasn't there because of all the foliage outside my window. I'd taken a couple quick steps towards the window to get a look before I confirmed what I saw was real. This all happened in a matter of 10 seconds. I bolted out of the room and towards the room my nannies were in. The hallways in my house are narrow and long, and large windows face the entrance. I didn't dare look out. I reached the room my nannies are in and I tell them what happened and they just laugh. To be quite honest, it was a boy who cried wolf situation. I was always a prankster and a bit imaginative, so it was hard to take me seriously when I was younger. I had to beg them to check with me, and from what I can remember, they took it seriously. We get to my room and no one's there. My window screen is left untouched and the man is gone. I don't think they were totally convinced, and neither were my parents. I couldn't sleep in my room for days because of the incident, and nothing was done about it. My house didn't even have an alarm system, so there was nothing stopping this person from coming back. I'm still very disappointed in how things were handled, and I had no power over anything. I have no idea how long that guy was out there for, and if he was watching me undress and then dress myself after I showered. I remember how fucked up his smile was. It was menacing. I'm glad that I was not harmed by this man, and that this was his only visit. At least I hope. I stopped opening my windows at night, and I missed the cool winter air. So, creepy guy with your face pressed against my window screen, let's never meet. And, alright, that wraps up Reddit's Unsettling True Stories Volume 2, or Part 2, whatever you want to call it. And thank you for watching. I enjoyed making this video, and if you want to see more of these Reddit's Unsettling Stories, or a different kind of branch of Reddit stories, or just creepypastas, or something like that, comment them down below, because I'm genuinely curious on what you guys want to watch. And yeah, I mean, you're this far into the video, so like and subscribe, and until next time, see ya.